Hello and welcome to another discussion in the SF Masterworks reading group. We work our way through the SF Masterworks in the order they were published as Masterworks by Gollancz. We are going to be talking about Emphyrio by Jack Vance. This is number 17 in the order that I guess we started about a year and a half ago. We read one book a month. The Emphyrio is the book for February. The next three books coming up, if you're going to be reading or discussing this book with us, are A Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick for the month of March, Star Maker by Olaf Stapledon for April, and Behold the Man by Michael Moorcock for May. And these discussions are open to anybody interested. So if you'd like to chat with us about any of these books, uh, please consider checking out the page viewing forum. We also pull up like forum threads there for these books. So if you'd like to just talk to us about the books without actually gumming on the discussion, also consider checking out the page viewing forum. With me, I have the usual group of friends. Livia, could you start us off with introductions?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And thank you for organizing all of this. I'm Livia J. Elliott. I'm a podcast host for Books Undone. I'm also an author and I publish books and books with choices, which are interactive fiction. And I have been at it for a few years right now. So I will hand it off to Gerald.
I'm Jared at the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel and also on podcasts like Speculative Speculations and some other fine podcasts associated with page viewing. And Susanna.
Hello, I'm Susanna Imaginario. I'm the author of Timelessness, and I run a tiny YouTube channel called Den of the Weird.
And just me last. I mean, this almost never happens. My name's Chris. I run the Chronicle of Chris YouTube channel, and I go last in all discussions.
Yes.
Not sure that's true.
It has been true for about the past 2 months. I've been demoted.
Yes. That's why you have to be nice, Chris.
Yes, I'm going to try.
So Emphyrio by Jack Vance. I didn't get a chance to look at the rating sheet before we went. So how did everybody like this book? Somebody want to start us off with high-level thoughts?
I think you'll find a general thumbs up all around for
yes, very
Mr. Vance so far.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Haven't seen Varsha's yet because she hasn't entered hers, but yeah, I high level thoughts. This felt to me like a riveting, almost sword and sorcery type adventure. This book just follows a single character that you kind of he has that what do you call that, the young man starting out type trope, and he goes through these various adventures, and he asks important questions about his society, which leads him down these roads to an adventure, and you follow along with him, and it's fascinating because as you're going along with him, you are learning about things with him, about his world and about the other worlds that this little sci-fi universe is involved with, and I just thought that the pace that Vance kept up and the way he fed us information along the way was just brilliantly done, and just kept you wanting more the whole time I was reading it. I don't normally read books that I don't want to put down, that I like straight through. I had other books going on when I started this, but then I was like, oh, the heck with them. I'm gonna finish this, and I thought it was a blast. I had a lot of fun reading this book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything Jared said, it was a similar experience. Couldn't put it down. So refreshing, so different. It's exactly the type of book that I hope to find when I join these discussions. It's just a brilliant story.
Chris.
Go next. Yeah, I mean, I really, really enjoyed it. It has all the trappings of like a pulp novel, right? It has that kind of kind of thing of a single person kind of fighting and finding out against the ruling class and all of that kind of stuff and kind of rising up. But it has incredible depth to it in terms of theme and in terms of ideas that it has gone on that sort of elevated way above like just a casual pulp novel while still being having that kind of driving, entertaining aspect the whole way through it. But it's kind of book that I am really surprised hasn't made it into a film or a film series because it seems ripe for that kind of treatment because it has a mythos, it has a backstory that our characters trying to discover about what has happened this place, the legend of Emphyrio himself, and the idea that he's trying to find out about it and that it ultimately leads him back at home in a lot of ways. And I can only imagine a really good interpretation of this on a film. Yeah.
Go ahead, Livia. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's okay. And I had kind of like a mixed experience with this one. I really like the start, and I thought the dynamics between Gil, which is the protagonist, and the father, Amiante, were just perfect. Like it really felt like a real relationship, even though it was presented in a very small way and quiet way. It was something about the comments that they made, the interactions they had that I really liked it. I didn't really enjoy the relationship of Gil with the friends he has on the second half of the book. So perhaps that was like why it went down a bit more for me. I really liked how the themes were presented. Like they are the importance of truth and perception and the impact of legends on what someone can do. They are very important, but they are again presented in a very subtle manner. It's not in your face. It's not that you are going to find an entire page of the writer, in this case, making an exposition about the theme. It's just something that unfolds as the story goes on. And I found that enthralling as well. And it's also more than as you read, like all the threads of the themes start to pull up together towards the end. And I really liked how he basically knit everything towards the end. But yeah, it was a pretty enjoyable read. And it was also, I found it a bit different to what we have read so far.
Yeah, I agree. It does feel very different from everything that we've read so far. Really appreciated the father-son relationship too. I don't know why, but at the end of the first chapter, I thought that he did not have a good relationship with his father. So I kind of went in waiting for it to sour, but it didn't. They were good until the end, and I felt really bad for him when Amiante died. But I really loved that dynamic, and I loved Amiante as a character and how he kept trying. Like he was sort of straddling this line between trying to do something, which he did in his own way. We learn later that he was one of the correspondents for the historians, and that also meant that he can't have an active participation in the course of history, I think. Or maybe not. I'm unclear on whether correspondence could interfere or if it was just the historians who couldn't. But he did that, and then immediately when they pulled that prank with nominating Gil as mayor by the name of Emphyrio, what he does to go out of his way to sort of promote that election, and the some of the conversations with the police, the versions of police in this, the welfare, what were they called, the welfare managers, and um yeah, those were really interesting, and sort of like that could be transpose into something that could happen in our world, like some unreasonable law that is not really broken, but you could use to say, oh, I don't like this, so I'm going to pretend that things are illegal. What you're doing is illegal. Like when the guy says he's shown a charter saying, I haven't broken any law. And the guy says, I don't understand this, so it's not binding. So you make up your own damn rules about it. So all of the police interactions I really enjoyed. Yeah, the second half, I agree, flagged a little bit for me with the friends because I didn't like them, and neither did Gil, so that was okay. So it's not like we were expected to like people who we don't, but I love how it all came together. It was really interesting to me. Like, this is one of the stories that, you know, if I hadn't finished, I would have no idea what to make of it, because, or maybe I would, but it would be wrong, because everything comes together in the end, and that this book really comes together in the last, what, 5 to 7 pages, with the realization that he has. So that's interesting too. That doesn't always work for me, because it feels like it's moving too fast and you're bringing it all together, but the build up that we've had in all the time up to then really managed to pull it off, I think.
Yeah, it's like I said, it was really fun. It was interesting because I found that aspect of his relationship with his friends to be actually quite fascinating, because they are the type of friends that draw you into these schemes and stuff, you know, and you go along because you're friends with them, and you want to be part of the, you know, part of the crew and stuff like that. But it only ends up ever getting him in trouble, or he ends up, or it ends up changing his life around in some cases, where he's suddenly a fugitive, or he suddenly has to leave the planet, or and then he actually becomes a pirate. And but I thought it showed a strength of character on his part, where he said, "All right, I'm putting my foot down, and I'm gonna get off here with these, with the what do they call them? The upperclassmen, or whatever they were,
The Lords?
The Lords.
the lords, yeah." And so he gets off the planet with the lords, and of course he's no better off with them, because he, you know, they're going to betray him eventually as well, even though he's doing the quote right thing by saving their lives, showing them how to survive in the wilderness. And it was just interesting how you kept getting all these hints about how the lords were different, but at first you don't really get that it's because they're actually a different race. They're a different species, and you're at first you just think it's because they got money, they're spoiled, and they're and to an extent there is that aspect of it, but it's also because they're actually a different species. And that was wild how that slow reveal came throughout the whole book, and he just gave little hints here and there about this is coming. But if you're not careful, you could just read right past that stuff, and you could look at it as more of a social strata problem rather than the actual history that went into their makeup and their making. And it was just I thought it was very clever how he did it.
Yeah.
And I almost thought, like, I was sort of heading in the direction of this is a metaphor for how people are all puppets of, like, a few people, the 1% who run society and so on. But then it, like, literally they are puppets by some who are being manipulated by someone else. And I really love that sort of layered approach. Like, I'm sure the metaphor's there, like, for us to look at ourselves as a society, maybe, but there's also the actual, like, literal part of there being puppets, which was almost hilarious as a reveal. But it was very well done. Like, it didn't feel out of place or weird for all that. Sorry, Susanna, were you going to say something?
Oh, I'm just nodding and agreeing. Yes. I love that reveal, and then when you go back and says, yes, of course. It's so obvious when you get there, but
Right.
it's just so well done.
Yeah. There's a couple of bait and switches. The thing that Jack Vance does in this book, he does the bait and switch of the social strata versus the actual race thing that you have going on, but he also has the bait and switch in terms of that you kind of think this is all a romance at the end of the day between the young lady and him, you know. And there certainly is a part where they explore that in some ways, but again, it's a complete kind of misnomer, because his larger outcome has absolutely nothing to do with her. You know, it's kind of more with the Legend of Emphyrio himself, and kind of that he rises above that kind of norm. I don't know if anybody else kind of felt this or whether you've read it, but I get really strong Mistborn vibes of this the whole way through.
Really?
The ball, the going to
Well,
the
there's the
party.
Cantilian Ball, there's the
Yeah.
Lords. Yeah, there's quite a lot of it. I got very strong Mistborn vibes all the way through, even Gil as a character, very much like our main character in Mistborn. So I think I was sort of led down the garden path a little bit by constantly thinking of that book and where it ends up, as opposed to what was happening in the thing. And it kind of helped my experience in that way, because I didn't see anything coming.
And
Something I really liked on this one is that the plot guides you somewhere, and I was always expecting like the closure at that point, but suddenly it branched out and took me somewhere else. And then when it reached there again, it branched out and took me somewhere else. And it was always like these smaller chains of plots that were considering. And at the end, at some point, I was thinking like, okay, what's the point of this? Because he's always changing, the context is always changing. But then again, at the end, everything was actually tied up very neatly and nicely. And also what I liked was with regards to the discussion of the lords weren't just a strata, a different class. There was always a bigger fish. Whenever Gil thought that this is a current bad, like for example, the welfare guide, at the end there was somebody that was worse or had more power. And again, there was always that has more power than them and so on. It's always like the chain never ends. And I found that pretty interesting how all those levels of power end up having an effect on the small people.
and they talk about how I guess the welfare guides don't have much to do lately because everybody's become suddenly very law abiding. Well, not suddenly, but they have become law abiding. People have become more like just, I guess, sheep who go about their business, keep their heads down, and do exactly what is told of them, and they don't break any rules. And I like that Gil, because of how guileless he is, he doesn't suspect for a moment that the Lord will break his promise, or that the Lord uh, that there is any way that he keeps saying to the end that they won't pay the ransom because they made that contract. They won't pay the ransom. Like, it doesn't occur to him that people can just break their promises, that they won't do what they say. And he's also shocked when his friends turn around and and again, there's like a bit of a microcosm of the society we just left, when they're like, you are disrupting the operations of the group, so so we have to vote you out, you have to leave. It's Yeah, he was a very interesting person to look at this world through it. And it didn't again feel like we were following someone too stupid, or like not a Ned Stark character. But like, not that Ned Stark was stupid, but like, can just open your eyes and look at what is happening around you. It was more yeah, he just believes that this is the way the world is, and I guess his father didn't really talk to him about more than that.
I love this concept in the beginning with his father, and of how duplication is illegal. I've found that concept fascinating, because that just goes like totally against our factory duplicating type of society that we have. And he puts that out there as this is how their society is now, and you wonder, it just makes you wonder how they got to that point. And then eventually Gil goes to another planet, and he finds all these duplicates of his father's work. And he's horrified at first, like, what do you mean, and then then he gets up this plan to go take advantage of that and go back and get the originals. And I thought that was like very clever of him to try to turn the tables, so to speak, on everything he's been through, and try to basically make lemonade out of some lemons he's been handed in life. And I thought that was great. I just I like how all that worked out. And when when he was talking to the guild master, he goes, the guild master is complaining back to him. He's like, once we introduce innovation, we destroy equilibrium. This is going to be impossible. And I thought just kind of wrapped up the society that he was in that in a sort of static manner that they were living. And uh, Gil kind of represented a progress that people didn't understand and want, or didn't think they understood and wanted, because of how
Mm,
disrupted it would be. And it was just part of that theme that you were talking about earlier, Olivia, that where it's in there, it's in the book, but it's not hitting you over the head to the point where it's bogs down the story at all. Because as soon as that stuff is said, the story just races right along,
yeah.
and you can choose to think about it or not. And I just thought it was so cleverly done.
And following on what you said, I also found the matter of the duplication fascinating. And also, it was inconsistent and purposeful, because right after they had this whole conversation about the duplication and why it's wrong and why they have to do everything, when Gil starts doing all the work as an apprentice, he gets to duplicate like some patterns that are already there that are made for practice, except that he doesn't use a machine. He just has to copy them by hand, which made me think like, what's the extent of the duplication? Because it doesn't matter if you have like the Mona Lisa and you are painting it by hand, you are still somewhat copying it, right? But that was okay in the world of Gil, like having a pattern and copying that, because he was doing wasn't duplication. But then using a ruler at some point, Amiante was using a ruler, that was a duplication because he was doing like a pretty straight line. And it seemed like a very illogical and convoluted rule just to make people behave, like the kind of rule that you just follow because it's a rule and it's being enforced, not because you understand it and actually can abide to it. And to me, at the start when I was reading it, didn't quite make sense. But most of the themes in this book don't make sense until the end. And at the end, you can see why the society was put in place in this way. Why would they have this type of small rules just to, as Varsha mentioned, perhaps uh, tone down the initiative of people and make them all more of the same, to make them law abiding to the point that they didn't discuss the law or didn't even think about contradicting it. So it was, again, in the details, like almost everything in this book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. Does what most of these great books and these sci-fi series have done. It sort of gives you enough. Jared sort of made this point in terms of like giving you crumbs that you can think through what that means for society without actually beating you over the head with it. In terms of like duplication. If you think about a free society, one of the very key tacits of a free society is free press. But if you've no duplication, there is no free press. There's no press at all. You're not able to do that in any way, and so you can kind of take that and see the sort of control in it. And when you look at some of the reviews of Emphyrio, like a lot of people will say, oh, it's a criticism of communist society, and yet there's an equal amount of reviews that say it's a criticism of capitalist society. And I think it's very much just about a criticism of controlled societies and ones that are very much about where they suppress the working class and basically have them almost just elevated above slavery because they are working hand to mouth, for these vouchers as a way to survive, barely surviving. And then you contrast it with the other people that have opted out of the system, who are forced into a place not necessarily of outright crime, but of really skirting the edges of crime and kind of doing things, which obviously leads them to crime, because then as those peers grow up, they kidnap, they stay, that turns to outright crime, but it's almost like the system forces them into that path as a way of escaping or trying to get autonomy for themselves.
Yeah. And I like the level of anxiety that Gil showed about possibly going independent, because you get rid of a certain security blanket in order to do that for the possibility of having a better life, but not necessarily. And he's worried about having to go to crime. And so there's that a lot to think about there, a lot to pack in about the different dynamics of their society and what you would have to do uh, to better your station in life. And that anxiety is real for a lot of people in life. And so it's really I thought it was, like, once again, just clever as hell.
Yeah. But at the same time, you have the opposite. Not worrying about any of that is easy. And so you have a lot of the cop, not the non-cop, the normal people, the one that follow the law, who basically don't worry about any of that. And they just rather stay where they are simply because it's easy. And Gil says it at some point, like, what will I do? How will I get the vouchers? How will I get the food? Because they are just handed everything. And to some extent, I saw it like how that tied up to the theme of the legend and the impact the legend has on Gil, which is basically the legend allowed him to dream and to imagine that he could be something different, And if you take the ability to dream or to hope away from people, then you get, as Varsha said, sheeps, basically, which was mostly what this society showed.
Yeah, yeah, and it was that legend of Emphyrio that was the impetus for his conflict with his society, and his following that legend and his drive for knowledge is what propels the story forward. Really,
I liked that his goal was financial independence, not riches. It
yeah,
just it just wanted to be independent, free of the system.
Yeah. Yeah.
It also reminded me, in modern times, kind of, you can do a parallelism between working corporate or having your own gig. Like it sounded like that. The way he presented it sounded like everybody trying to do a gig, and that's it. That's how you become independent.
And a lot of the rules in corporations are as arbitrary and vaguely oppressive as the ones that the wellness guides bring to the people to control them, right? And um, yeah, on the subject of Emphyrio and the play, I really loved again, and I think that sort of structure of the book, also the structure of the play, this aspect that the puppet goes on an adventure, it comes back, and then it plays the role of Emphyrio, and then and then Emphyrio gets executed, but then the puppet gets executed too, and the puppet master explains to Gil in the end that he picks a devious puppet, like one that doesn't want to behave anymore, and destroys it. And I think that plus what he sees in the ruins that he tries to find gives him this realization that was Emphyrio a puppet? I forget. Was he a puppet that went rogue, or was he a human who was destroyed? But regardless of that, like the way the final reveal mirrors the structure of the play, and that the actual Emphyrio character was also maybe a, I don't know if he was a puppet, but at least he was trying to get rid of the puppets in the world. But he hadn't done it, or they came back in a different form after he succeeded. So I really love that. Again, the metaphorical layer plus the literal aspects of that story, how they mesh together. That was so well done. Yeah.
You're just peeling the layers.
Yeah.
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 I also
This is also. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I also loved actually how the outcome of Emphyrio actually in actuality was not the legend, if you know what I mean, because people had 3 or 4 different readings of actually what happened to Emphyrio, and so the suppressing of Emphyrio actually didn't really work in its own way, in much the same way as the suppression of the people didn't work long term. Like those systems that are set up will only work for so long before either conditions aren't raised enough, or people will react and rebel, even if it's just 1 or 2 at a time. It'll keep coming around the cycle. Sorry, that.
And the fact that because they had no press and their society was kind of stagnant, they didn't even know exactly how long ago the events of Empyrio had happened. And because they didn't know how long ago it was and what exactly had happened, that's how the legend grew. the name became this thing. It could be anything. It could be how it was depicted on the puppet show, or has his father told him it was slightly different, or the segment. So we didn't know what exactly happened, and it was the drive he had to find out. He just wanted to know what actually happened. Just if he had, an history book, there would be no story. But because they were denying history, there's even a line somewhere. I was trying to find it. And I thought it was brilliant. We are not a historical people. We seem to live for the events of the day, or more accurately, from one judgment to the next. We need history just to.
Yeah, that's a good line, actually. Really good line.
So that said everything about the society, and I was hooked. It's like, oh, I'm gonna have to.
Yeah,
read it.
and that bit also tied up to I think to one of the key themes, because when people find out the actual truth because he revealed it, the whole society rebels, and the lords are expelled and so on. And that's the impact of truth and the impact of history. How before, because they didn't know the true history, they just accept the system because that's what it had always been. And the moment that the truth is revealed, suddenly they rebel and they try to find something different. I found that it was a very interesting depiction of how impactful truth can be, especially in history, and to understand the roots of a society.
And there is a constant denouncement of truth, at least truth as Gil sees it throughout the book, between the welfare guides and his friends and the lords all giving up on their promises or going back on what they said. But in the end, some version of the truth did bring about a change in society. So it yeah, I guess there's a bit of a battle that truth has to triumph in the end, so to speak. But that works out too. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting that he had to go to different planets in order to uncover things, to find those truths. He couldn't stay within his society in order to do that. He had to go on the adventure. He had to find other places to find
Gain
out
perspective.
these things. Yeah, get a different perspective. And even then, he didn't get everything he needed, but he got bits and pieces here and there wherever he went, and kind of put it all together. Like in the end, like we said, yeah.
Yeah.
And what did you think of Earth when he goes to Earth, the state of Earth, as a society, as a planet?
I thought it was a reference to the old world in the sense of history, that a lot of people consider Europe to be the old world and set in their ways. And it was like someone from the new world coming in and checking and seeing what happened there. I thought it could be a reference to that, but it was also like they had time. It was a complete different mindset the people there had, to the point that even if they weren't aliens, they were to some extent for Jill because of how different they were. Like the
That's
clash
it.
of two different mindsets. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, because they were the opposites. They were all concerned. I think
Yeah.
he says at the end, "Oh, you were all concerned with the past," because they had so much history. So their mindset was
Yeah.
developed on the weight of that history. And I think that
Mm.
then the girl would reply something like, "No, we are concerned about the souls of events." So they didn't look towards the future. The future was done, was accomplished. They've been to other planets. It was the concern for the soul of events. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and also the fact that they didn't live on the day to day. So they had the quote unquote luxury to worry about those things. While in
Yeah.
the other planets, they were just surviving.
Yeah, I love and I love that he just throws this little bit of history in there, because Gil was wondering about how the lords came into power of the utilities and stuff like that, and he was told it happened like 1,500 years ago, and it was before the Star Wars. I like that little mention of Star Wars in there, and before the Dreadful War, and before other wars without number and stuff like that. So you get this you're getting the sense that this really is the far, far, far future, um, and he mentions emperors and he mentions a bunch of different things, but it's all just given in passing. It's not you're not bogged down with exposition or anything like that. It's all just like I said, hinted at enough to give you that taste and keep you going. And I just love how he did that. And Gil was in awe when he when he was learning this history, and I think that was like us learning it too. And I was in awe at the same time, and I was just like, that's just great stuff.
This was pre-Star Wars, right?
Yes, it was. Yep.
You think there's probably some influence there? I would like to think so, but probably not.
I'd like to think so, yeah, but I'm sure he's not the only guy who had, uh, the ideas of spaceships traveling from planet to planet. But
No, but just being so far, far away,
Yeah.
in the future, and just similarities.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think the overall for all of the themes, the heart of it, as was sort of alluded at the very start, is the relationship between Gil and his father, and the sense as a reader that it's not an overtly loving relationship, but it's built on respect and silent caring, if you know what I mean. There's a sense you get off the father that he is trying to educate his son and create a future for his son, both in terms of what he does as a job, but also outside the job. And the son doesn't appreciate it at the time. It's like almost like that reveal at the end when he goes to the institute and finds out his father was working in secret for this institution. It's like this great moment of pride for him that actually his father was doing things and doing this goal that Gil is on himself, doing this quest for himself in his own way, even though he passed, probably more so than when he went to the planet and seen that his father was seen as a great craftsman. I think it kind of, for Gil, was bigger that his dad had taken those steps to try and free the society himself in his own way, and it means that when he's with his peers or the people that we think all suck, they do all suck, and that actually even though he are his peers, it's the teachings of his father and the core of his father that keeps on staying with him between that and the legend as the bit that drives him through the book.
Yeah, and it's amazing that his father kind of kept some of that knowledge from him as well. So that was also like another quest that Gil was on, was to see his own history in addition to his quest to find out about Emphyrio and just the history of the lords in general. He was also on this inner quest to find out his own history about his father, and he even reads some of his father's writing out of his portfolio to somebody, and it's philosophical. It's in a situation of infinity, every possibility, no matter how remote, must find physical expression. And he's reading this to other people, and they're talking about it. And one of them calls it obscure ambiguity, and the other one's and they're going back and forth. And I and that's interesting because it's an aspect of his father that he might not have respected, but early on. But then when he presents these things to other people and they talk about it, it kind of builds that respect and that history, and then he goes on to find out more later. So it's and that just another layer to the tale here. It's really great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he really takes his time at the beginning. It feels like, this book is a bit slow getting somewhere because it takes its time building the relationship between father and son, explaining the world, the guilds, how the economy works. And, there's a lot of information at the beginning, a lot in a small book, anyway, that feels like, why am I learning this? But okay, it's fine. We are living the daily lives of this father and son. And then there's a payout at the end, because if we are invested in these characters, we're invested in their lives, we understand their lives pretty well by the time the story actually kicks off and things start Even when it completely shifts into a different planet, a different situation, we have a strong foundation on the character and what he's after, and that keeps us grounded. The same way I guess he was, because he never lost sight of what he really wanted, despite all the little detours and accomplishments and, well, disasters. So clever, and only 200 pages. Brilliant.
And he could just as easily have, taken the money and run and done something
Yeah.
with it, or even just stayed where he was. And I think he had a modicum of financial independence where he was in that other planet, right? But he wanted to sort of, uh, I don't think he quite came out and said it, but he wanted to sort of finish his father's work, so to speak, or like it was revenge that he wanted for his father. But I guess once he went to the historians and found out his father's role, he's like, no, I can't just sit around doing nothing when my father did all of that and put his life at stake for all that. Um, the the moment when he finds out that his father's work was duplicated, and that it and the people that think that, oh, the original is in a museum, and I'm sure the guy who made it is like living in riches because this is so good, he's a master. That was one of the most infuriating things I've read recently. They're barely getting by on that planet, and meanwhile these people who hate duplication, apparently for reasons, they are duplicating and producing copies of his work which sell for just about slightly less than what he made for the original. Which, yeah, that bit was very interesting as a turning point in the story.
It also speaks to how little people value art in general. Like having a piece of, an artwork in there, a sculpture, it's prestigious, but at the same time, people don't want to pay for it. And it's another of the absurd things that the book points out,
Mm. Yeah.
Well, most people
I
can't,
did,
even if they wanted
yeah.
to be fair.
I did have a question that I wanted to put up forth. What did you think of the religion that they had in the book about leaping and jumping? It was quite original, but also, like Marsha said, it was another arbitrary thing they had to do.
Just nonsense. Just exercise, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it is one of the religions, or at least the rituals, that I can actually get behind, because you're getting some physical exercise out of it.
I mean, it sounds like they had no sports, and of course they had no army. So what are all young men going to do? They just they have to jump.
Yeah.
They just leap, pray, and just jump. I love the description of the guild master, the master leaper or whatever, because it was all the legs were all corded in muscle. It was really, really pumping.
Wait, and who the hell is Finuka? What is up with that? Do we ever find out till the end? No, right? I I thought we might find out the Finuka disposes, where they like deeply worship and they have to bring a lot of reverence and leap and whatnot, like that field trip they went on where there's a big rock that accidentally has the word Finuka disposes, and they have a conversation about whether it's a local influence or a universe wide influence or whatever with the chief leaper. I was wondering if almost like that is some corporation named Finuka, and this is their dumping ground or something, and these people are worshipping it several hundred years later, because Finuka is never explained as an entity. And what does he dispose? Like, even that doesn't make sense. It's again like the sheeple aspect of it all, where like, okay, it's random words strung together. Finuka, your god, apparently disposes, but what does he dispose? Like, what is it that we are worshipping here? What exactly are we holding in reverence? But
It's a good question. I don't know.
yeah. Yeah, it's more that I guess the people themselves don't seem to be questioning any of that. It's a religion. They tell us to jump. We say how high.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
Yeah.
A question I had was, I'm still a little confused of where chapter 1 fits into the rest of the narrative, where he's being interrogated.
I Go ahead, Chris.
No, go ahead. No, I was just going to lift the book to check something. Go ahead.
So when he comes back to the planet with his friend from the name of the planet that starts with M, I think he gets caught trying to buy stuff, and that's when he gets interrogated and released. But then he comes back, and so there is a part where I think we meet him after the interrogation. He gets caught, then we go to what happens after the interrogation, because the interrogation was in the first chapter, I think.
Yeah.
And
Okay, so I kind of missed that part
Yeah.
where
It's
it
a bit that
jumped.
you have you have a bit of a frame narrative, so you have the context, a bit of the frame narrative, and then it catches up in that part Varsha mentioned, and it continues from when he was being interrogated on chapter 1.
Yeah, but that's what I thought initially, but then something didn't add up because um, in interrogation, didn't he have like his brain exposed? He seemed to recover very well, very fast, especially when he gets caught and then he goes back because he's angry and he needs to, wants to get. That was brilliant. I need to go back now while I'm angry. So unless they healed him very fast, I got the impression that it was probably something that happened.
oh, did he actually have his brain open? I
Or
thought he
maybe I
was
read
under
it
the
wrong,
influence.
but
Yeah.
it was something that
No,
they had like
he
electric
had.
stuff. Yeah.
Okay,
So-
okay.
Yeah, he had, but there is a line that says something like when he goes back to the ship after, there is a line or something that he had cuts in the head, perhaps hinting that he was like put back together. I don't know.
Okay, so they had excellent medical care. Okay. Because it
And-
was the only thing that didn't add up. I said, well, he
Yeah.
recovered really fast.
And how he felt after that also resembles, I think, how the father was described when he came back from his two rehabilitation occurrences, and like, he was disoriented and couldn't
And he had
remember,
scars.
what he was doing. So, yeah, I thought this was how they rehabilitate the people. Anything that we haven't covered so far?
Love how he broke the system by getting all the artworks given to him for free, essentially basically loaded onto his ship. That was kind of like, how do you break the system? Break their paperwork and get them all delivered to him. And
Yeah,
yeah,
and
it was clever.
yes. And the people loading the ship were like, oh, it must be really rich out there. You want all the best stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Okay, then.
Yeah,
Let's.
the
Yeah.
yeah, I love how it just ends with the proclamation, like on the last page, and like it just kind of leaves you to imagine how all the aftermath of this goes down. There's no denouement, there's no aftermath of the actual announcement that the lords are no longer lords, and but it really but because he's given us so much to work with within this short 200 pages, I think it's pretty easy to kind of just put together yourself what's going to happen after this announcement, and try to, of course, nothing ever goes the way you might think it might go, but I just love how that was just like the last page, and you just, all right, here you go, boom.
Yeah. And very, very sweet how, in this house lived and worked the son of Almirante Tavok. Okay, so it doesn't start with him. It's the son of, who then used the name of Emphyrio to it's just very well done.
Good stuff.
Yeah. The people who came before him and the legend are what was important there.
It had
I like that.
continuity, it had history. So it's just
Nice.
so good.
Nice. On a world that did not have history. Nice. I like that. Cool. Let's do outros then. Chris, do you want to go first?
Yay! My name's Chris Moore. You can find me on the Chronicle of Chris YouTube channel. You can find me on the Speculative Speculations podcast. You can find me at pagetoon.com.
Nice. Jared?
And you can find me at the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and you can also find me on those places that Chris mentioned. And so check them out.
Susanna.
Same, you can find me on the page showing forums and on my YouTube channel, Den of the Weird.
And you can find my podcast, Books Undone, anywhere where podcasts are. I'm also on page chewing, and I'm on almost every social as Livia J. Elliott. So
Nice. And yeah, you can find me on the YouTube channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain, on a bunch of the podcasts already mentioned, especially Speculative Speculations, and on the Patreon forum. Once again, if you'd like to read along with us or talk to us about these books, upcoming are A Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick, Star Maker by Olaf Stapleton, and Behold the Man by Michael Moorcock. Consider checking out the Patreon forum if you'd like to chat with us about any of these books. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next month.